theme from Hill Street Blues, featuring Larry Carlton, by Mike Post and Larry Carlton. And we are about... I'm really excited because, look, it's been a long time since I've spoken to Matthew. He's a fantastic guy. I've worked with him on The Legend of Ben Hall. I speak to him a lot. And I've actually interviewed him before when I did the Actors Network meetings in Melbourne. Matthew, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Fantastic. Matthew, how have you been?
I've been pretty well, thank you. I've returned back to my home state of South Australia to live. I've been in Melbourne for 13 years and I've just come back. So settling in and all going well.
So you were one of the smart ones. I mean, you know, I grew up in Adelaide too, and I moved to Melbourne. I lived there for 29 years. You were smart enough to get out a lot sooner than I did.
That's it. Yeah, I got out when the traffic was just getting insane. So I got out and come back to a much more peaceful.
The Melbourne traffic is atrocious.
Yeah, it did. And I really did notice it get worse. So over the 13 years, I saw it go from bad to shocking. So it was a good time to come back to sunny, quiet Adelaide, where you can get around everywhere in half an hour.
Yeah. Oh, look, here in Perth, people complain if it takes more than half an hour to get from one place to another, and I always say you should try Melbourne. It takes an hour just to cross the CBD.
That's right.
And quite often it takes at least 2 hours just to get across the bridge.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So thank goodness. Thank goodness those days are mostly behind me.
So Matthew, you're the owner, I suppose, managing director, whatever you, what do you want to call it, with Two-Tone? Is it Two-Tone?
Two-Tone Pictures. Yep,
Yes.
That's my production company. I am the director of that company, and I've been making films under the Two-Tone banner for quite a few years now, probably close to 20.
Well, your first feature film was Twin Rivers, but you did stuff before that.
I did.
I know that you. I don't know. Do you still? I don't know if you still do it, but you used to do a lot of animation.
Yeah, that's sort of how I started in the industry. I began as an animator and a sculptor at a production company in Adelaide called Anifex, who mostly did television commercials and things like that. And that was sort of my foot into the industry. So, yeah, I worked on a number of television commercials, such as the Home Hardware.
That was the Dogalogs.
The Dogalogs, yep. I did the Dogalog ads. I worked on Louis the Fly, Mr. Reach with the flip top head guy. Who else did I work on? Mr. Rental ads. Oh, just lots of different. The Schmackos ads. That was a big one I was involved in.
We all love the Schmackos ads. They're hilarious, especially the big fat lady.
Yeah, that's me.
Yep. But, we did a lot of ads with what Roger and
Schmackos for?
Yeah, that's the one. I forget that character's name, but yeah, I animated her a lot. Was always swinging around the fat under her arms. There was actually bits of wire under her arms, so we could swing that big fat roll under her arms around. We called them bingo wings.
Yep.
So what do you actually, when you're doing the stop motion animation like that, was it plasticine? What is it you use?
Well, it really depended on the ad, but we used we used many different things. Sometimes they were made of rubber, sometimes they were made of a foam latex, other times they were made of plasticine, and sometimes they were a combination of all three. It really just depended on the style and what we were going for. Yeah. So, but it was always the same principle. You take an object, a puppet made of whatever, and you move it one frame at a time. Take a picture, move it. Take a picture, move it. And then you do that, and you'll get through maybe 3 seconds, 4 seconds of animation in a day.
Yeah, that's crazy. Especially, I mean, I can't imagine how long it could possibly take to do a full feature in the stop motion animation, and I know that they've done it because
it takes about three years, sometimes 4.
Yeah, and that's just to do the animation. Then they do the voiceovers. But I mean, did you ever get? Was Wallace and Gromit before the before the Dogalogs and all that was, or
It was actually around the exact same time that,
yeah,
but they were going on over in England.
yeah,
So, and Anifex in lots of ways were doing what Aardman was doing in England. Anifex was doing here in Australia. And I think for me, had I stayed in animation, going to work for Aardman would have been my next step.
yeah,
But I really wanted to get out of the animation game, and because I wanted to get into long form directing, and that was really where my heart was.
yeah.
So, and actually, not many people know this, but technically, the first feature film I ever made was before Twin Rivers, and it was an experimental comedy called The Biscuit Effect.
Okay.
But because that film never got like an official release, like it didn't get picked up by a distributor or anything like that, I don't consider it part of my, one of my feature films in that sense, because it really was an experimental fun thing that we did. But it is a feature length, and we screened it at a few places, and we've played it on some community channels and things like that over the years. But yeah, it was a good experiment.
Now, I've seen a short animated film that you did.
Yep.
What was it called? The
Scam.
The Scam, and absolutely hilarious. Cheryl, if you ever get a chance to see this short animated, how long did it run for? About 15 minutes.
Yeah, it was just about 12 or 13 minutes. It took me 3 years to make, and I was making that film kind of really opened the door for me to get into Anifex and get a full-time job there. I was working for them here and there as a bit of a lackey, and I got my toe in the door, but that film really opened up the door for me.
Yeah,
so that's available on YouTube if anyone wants to see it.
It's gangsters and jazz clubs and all sorts of stuff happening in that. It's a great short film. Do yourself a favor, folks. Please check that out. As Matthew said, it's on YouTube. It's called The Scam, and it's absolutely hilarious. Now, let's talk about other areas of your career, Matthew, because as you said, you were going to do animation, and I'm guessing if you were, doing 3 years just to get a 12-minute film together, you'd probably, at some point you probably felt like, throwing it in or something like that. I mean, it'd be time consuming just to get a short film done.
It was.
Did you ever feel like that? Did you ever think, God, this is just taking too long, I've had enough of it?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's pretty much every film I've ever worked on, I've reached that point I've reached that point in, somewhere along the line. But with animation in particular, I just felt the cost benefit ratio wasn't high enough for me to continue. Yeah, I was spending 3 years to make a 12, 13-minute short.
Yeah.
And I also wanted a career, so I had to be making films that were commercially viable. There's no money in short films. So I really thought, it was just too much work. I want to spend 3 years of my life working on something. I want it to be a movie.
Yeah.
So I decided to make a feature film after The Scam. And I ended up spending 6 years of my life making that first feature film.
Wow. So is that from concept to completion, or is that filming?
Pretty much that was from from concept and starting to actually shoot it all the way through to releasing it. 6 years.
Well, that's
four years of filming and 2 years of post-production.
4 years of filming. Now, that was Twin Rivers?
Yes, that's Twin Rivers. Yeah, and we were
Go on.
We were shooting it on weekends. It was all volunteers. It was filmed from out the back of a car. We didn't really have a big crew. It was just a camera and a tripod.
Yeah.
A couple of mates. It was that's sort of really how it began.
For something that was done just on weekends with volunteers and shooting out the back of your car and all the rest of it, it's another great film.
No, thank you.
Twin Rivers. Now, that had you and your brother in it, didn't it?
Yeah, my brother, he's a very good actor, and because the story is about two brothers, it just seemed to make sense that, two brothers would play two brothers. I had an interest in acting, though it's never something I wanted to pursue as a career. But I actually thought that it would be easier. It was just one less actor to try to have to wrangle, you know?
Yeah.
And however, after going through the process, I really wish that I had cast that role with someone else, and all I could do was direct, because it was hard being both actor and director, especially on your first film. In hindsight, I would have not done that, and I wouldn't do it again.
Yeah.
So, but I made it work.
It's definitely hard if you to direct yourself if your character is a main character. I when I'm doing theatre or film and all the rest of it, and I'm directing, I don't do main characters because I can't direct myself. I'd rather,
Yeah, it is hard.
yeah, I'd rather be told by someone else what to do.
Yeah, it's very hard to have an sense of understanding of how you're coming across, which is, I ended up having a friend that worked on that film with me called Andrew, and he was like the cameraman, but because he came from a theater background, he ended up becoming almost my surrogate director.
Yeah.
I could rely on him to basically direct my performance and tell me if I need to go louder, more emotional, whatever.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to even as a director, and you know what you want. It's when it comes to yourself, it's very hard to regulate your own how your performance is going. So because you have no third eye on it. So yeah, it's not something I would recommend to anyone to both direct yourself.
No, I mean,
direct.
it took. It was a long time before Clint Eastwood ever directed himself. He was acting for many years before he took on the role of directing.
That's right.
His first directorial, of course, was Play Misty for Me. But now after Twin Rivers, was it then The Legend of Ben Hall? Was that the next one?
Yes, that was the very next one, though it wouldn't come for a good it wouldn't come for another 7 or 8 years.
Was that because you were preparing it all that time? Because I know Ben Hall is about a 3-hour film.
Yeah, it's 2 hours 20.
2 hours 20. I thought it was 3 hours. Maybe it just felt like that because I was sitting out in the coach in the freezing cold that day. But
yeah, you spent a lot more than 3 hours in that coach.
Oh, I did. I was sheltered. I was still freezing. I felt sorry for everyone else, but it was probably the. I mean, I've done Neighbours. I've worked with. What was his name? Played Basil of Expedition in.
Oh yeah, Basil Exposition in Austin Powers.
Yeah, what's the actor's name?
Oh
Michael
yeah,
York.
what's that?
Michael York. I've worked with them, and I found that The Legend of Ben Hall was actually the best experience I've ever had.
Great.
But I know that you threw everything into that. I mean, it was only supposed to be a shorter version at some stage. Explain this one.
Yeah, well, it was. It's got a bit of a strange genesis. I mean, straight after Twin Rivers, I instantly wanted to go into my next film, and I discovered the story of Ben Hall. I was very passionate about it, and I wrote a big screenplay. It was like 200 pages long, which adapted the entire Ben Hall story. And I thought, this is what I want to do next. But it was just too expensive, and every producer I took it to, everyone I spoke to about it, basically said, you will never make this your next feature. It's too expensive. You don't have enough experience. So what I did is I put it on the shelf and said, okay, I'll make this in 20 or 30 years when I'm grey beard and I've got experience and I've got the money. I'll make this big $30 million Ben Hall extravaganza. And I accepted that. And then I spent the next few years spinning my wheels in the mud trying to get much lower budget films made, horror films and things like that. And I just wasn't getting anywhere. I was getting very close, but everything was just sort of the ground would collapse underneath at the last minute. And sort of in frustration, and as I was reaching, 5 years had gone by and I still hadn't made another movie, I decided to go to crowdfunder, go to the Kickstarter and raise some money to take like the last 20 pages of the Ben Hall script and shoot that as a short film, just for both a bit of fun to keep my directing skills up and also to play in that world and potentially have a little bit of a, I guess, a teaser for when I want to make my big Ben Hall movie.
Yeah.
And then, it was a very successful campaign, and we shot the short film. We shot about 75% of it, and then our money dried up. But we had enough to put together this really awesome trailer. And based on the strength of that trailer, some other producers came on board. The other producers I'd been working with on these other films that had fallen through, they came on board. They really loved it. They saw its potential in the marketplace. And we all and even though I was actually really nervous and actually didn't want to make this version of Ben Hall initially, because it had to be a much more condensed version of the big script that I'd written. It was essentially the last third of that script. We had to figure out how we're going to make that on a really low budget, and we found the way to do it. We got a little bit of investment money, government money, and we used a lot of favors from cast and crew, a lot of freebies, and we all just knuckled down and just got the film made. So it's a bit of a miracle that The Legend of Ben Hall even exists. By all rights, it shouldn't exist. I don't know how we pulled it off, the scale of the film on the money that we had. But it exists. It wanted to be born, and that was sort of how it came around.
Now, I know that because it was a very grueling production. I mean, I went to Gundagai initially to do my scenes, and then we couldn't do my scenes that trip, and you're actually going to scrap that. And I said to you, look, you've got this was the weekend that we had the reenactors there doing extra work.
Yeah.
And they all saw me and said, "Oh, you're playing Magistrate Rose. You're Magistrate Rose. I play that character in the reenactment. I waved the hat and everything outside the coach."
That's right, yeah.
You were going to scrap that scene. I said to you, I don't think you can, because the reenactors have mentioned this. They know that character. That character seems to be really important for the story. And you said, well, it is. You remember we then went to... We went back another 6 months later or something, and we completed it. We completed that scene. We did that scene in Victoria.
Yeah.
Which Gundagai would have been great, Cheryl, because that was actually where it took place.
Where it happened, yeah.
But I didn't, I think it was my suggestion to you that we do that because to postpone it and do that another day, because we needed to get that scene in there. It was important, and
it was one of the key events in the Ben Hall story. Yeah. And what we were going to do is when we first shot it up at Gundagai, unfortunately that day it all just fell apart. We just didn't have the time, resources, or people to shoot that scene, and a lot of things, the wheels fell off.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, in that, and for the short film, I was going to scrap it. But when we were going to make it as a feature and we got that extra money and everything, then it was right. No. Yeah. Let's do that scene again. Let's find a new place to film it, and let's figure out how we can actually achieve it. And we were fortunate enough to find a similar coach and get some of those reenactors to come down to Victoria, and we got to finish it for the feature. So, it all turned out in the end, but
it worked nicely. It was a great scene. It was a great, and it was a fantastic film. But I watched you in that time lose a ton of weight, Matthew, because of all the stress you were going through.
Yeah, it was an extremely stressful shoot. I was it was because it was such a large production.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the people who worked on the film were just marvelous and were hugely supportive of me. So there was some problems, but few problems like that. But just the stress of running of such a massive production on such a small scale, it was stressful. And everyone thought that I wasn't eating, but I actually was. I was actually eating in large quantities, but my weight was just falling off because I was just running around all the time. There was no time to stop ever. It was morning, noon, night, and just work, work, work.
Yeah.
And yeah, I couldn't keep the weight on at all. I think yeah, my trousers were just falling off. I had to buy new. I remember having to go
I remember
and
this.
go to Big W, and I bought new trousers that were like 2 or 3 sizes smaller than my not regular size, just so I could had a pair that fit me.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty crazy time, and I have noticed that in most stressful film shoots, yeah, it's a great way to lose weight.
It is, and especially a film that you're so passionate about, and you're so focused on it, and you're like, I have to get this right. I cannot falter in any aspect on this. And I mean, we've talked about, in the past, we've talked about a lot of the bushranger films like Ned Kelly and so forth, and how, there's been several different adaptations of that story, but none of which have been 100% historically accurate.
Yeah.
Whereas Ben Hall, you had your historians. I mean, I remember coming to you. It was a meeting. I didn't actually audition for you. I met with you. And
We had like a meet and greet, didn't we, with different actors? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I came down. I sat in your living room, and I ate all your biscuits. And I still remember they were Arnott's biscuits. They were yummy. But we just talked, just you and I. It was just one-on-one. We were talking, and then because what attracted me to the role or what gave me the idea that I'd actually get a chance was the fact that I had a full beard. I had a goatee. I had a goatee.
Yes, yep.
And you had said in your casting call, facial hair will be an advantage. I'm like, okay, I've got facial hair. Let's give this a shot. And I've met with you. We've talked. I think I'd sent you a show reel or something.
Yep, you had sent me a show reel. Yeah,
and it was that night you called me up and said, look, I want to offer you this role. And I was so excited. And I said to you, okay, how do you want my facial hair? Full beard, what do you want? And you said, well, I'll get back to you. You went and spoke to the historian, and you came back and said, the historian has said mutton chops.
Yep, mutton chops indeed.
Mutton chops. And you said, are you still interested? Of course I was. You'd be mad not to want to work on a production like that. But we shaved it into mutton chops.
Quite impressive mutton chops.
And then, but no, look, it was such a great. But Matthew, productions like that, and then of course you had the cost after that.
Yep, the cost was again, and it took another. It would be another from time of release. Yeah, another 7 years before the cost would finally come out. So a long time between drinks, but it's actually very common for most Australian independent directors. It's usually 7 years.
Yeah.
It's the 7 year curse. You can't get to the next one for another 7 years.
Okay, because I've heard that, that everyone says to me, look, the filming is 10% of the process. And that's
I'd say that's about right.
That's what a lot of beginner directors, I think, need to realise, that filming is only the actual filming process is 10%. Post-production and pre-production is the other 90%.
I would have another view of that. I would say filming is 10%, post is 20%, and the other 70% is trying to find financing for the film or trying to get your film out there and seen. I would say the greatest amount of my time is spent trying to get the money for the film, or once the film's made, trying to get it out there.
Yeah.
And then the other 30% is actually shooting and editing and post and all that sort of stuff and pre-production. Yeah. So that's probably, on the full spectrum, I'd say that's what it's like.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the legend of Ben Hall, you said before that had you waited until you're grey and everything to do it, it would have been a $30 million project.
Yep.
It wasn't a $30 million project, was it?
No, it was 1/30th of that.
Yeah.
No, it was a very low budget. We did it for under $1 million.
I think.
So,
are you allowed to say? Can you? I don't know what you can say. Can't say. Can you say what it actually ended up? What the budget was on that in the end?
no, look, I think in the end, the amount of cash that was spent on it was just under $1 million in cash. Yeah. Had we paid everybody, all the actors, their rates, all the crew, all the full rates, it probably would have clipped out around about 3 or 4 million.
Yeah.
So, oddly enough, if you tried to get that film made, if you just took that script and went out right now to try to get it made, you probably wouldn't be able to do it for less than 20.
Yeah.
But just the fact that we had so many people involved who were willing to just come on board and do it for nothing, and were just so supportive and put in 150% and so much time, we were able to do it for that. Had it not been for that kind of spirit that was in that film, it just wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
It'd just be too expensive. And there hasn't been a lot of bushranger films made, before Ben Hur and after Ben Hur, there's been virtually no bushranger films made. So, it seemed to be the only way, and it wasn't because there weren't other people wanting to make a Ben Hur movie. You had Sam Worthington had a Ben Hur project that he'd been trying to get off the ground since the early 2000s. Russell Crowe had his eye on the Ben Hur story for decades. And there was another filmmaker, the guy who did Van Diemen's Land. He was working on a script and trying to get finance for a Ben Hur film at the same time as me. So there was a lot of people that tried to make Ben Hur movies. Oh, and there was a guy who wrote a Ben Hur novel who was also a filmmaker, and he was trying to get a movie made. So many were trying, and for me it was whoever got there, whoever finally was the person who was going to make the movie of Ben Hur, they had one chance to get it right.
Yeah.
And that's sort of why I had that sense of responsibility that, really, no one's going to do this again. I've got to make it as accurate as I can. I've got to do it as good as I can. And look, I know it's not a perfect movie. It has some flaws. We did it under such duress. We could never, scale the heights that I was really aiming for. But, we gave it our all, and people like it. People enjoy the film. And, it was the best we could do under the circumstances. I sort of equate making The Legend of Ben Hur as to being a painter and trying to do an oil painting while standing in the middle of a hurricane.
Yeah.
That's kind of what making The Legend of Ben Hur was like. I know if I was in a comfortable, expensive studio, I could have done a lot better. But in that hurricane, that's the best I could paint. So, yeah.
Well, look, it was a masterpiece in my eyes. And I've shown it to a lot of people as well, and they've all said how good it is. It's been on TV many times.
It's been on Channel 9 several times. It's now on SBS On Demand. So if there's anybody listening who wants to see The Legend of Ben Hur, head over to SBS On Demand. You can watch it for free.
I'll be doing that when I get home.
You'll get to see some of my acting skills there,
Oh
Cheryl.
no! I see him every day. No, just kidding.
Just with better mutton chops.
Yeah, clean mutton chops.
It was a great film to work on, Matthew, and you were going to do a trilogy at some stage.
That was the hope, because I had basically taken 1/3 of that great big Ben Hur script and turned that into the feature film, which left 2/3 of all the material still sitting unused.
Yeah,
because the story picks up right at it's only about the last 9 months of Ben Hur's life. I had another 2.5 years of material of his bushranging career that I hadn't even covered.
Yeah.
So my hope was to turn it into a trilogy which focused on 2 different bushrangers, of which Ben Hur would have appeared in those movies, but it would have focused on a different bushranger. And then together they would be like 3 companion movies with a different hero character, but they all share in the same movie.
Yeah.
They all share the same sort of story. They all, share characters. But and just unfortunately, the Legend of Ben Hur just did not make enough of a splash. It didn't make enough money. That meant that, to get the budgets for those two sequel films, we couldn't have done it the same way. We couldn't have asked everybody to come back and work for favors again. So, they just were too expensive. There just wasn't the market interest there. And Ben Hall just didn't rake in the money, and therefore there was no way to convince anybody to
back it. Yeah. Which is a pity. I mean, you and I have talked about the possibility of Moondyne Joan. I've told you about that story. You said you know about the story. This is a bushranger from. Was he a bushranger?
He was like it was like it's like Western Australia's bushranger.
Yeah.
There's a pub in Freo called Moondyne Joe's.
There is.
And he was most bushranging was confined to Queensland and New South Wales, Victoria. Very few, if any, in South Australia, Northern Territory, and WA. But occasionally you get some stories coming out of those places of, interesting characters on the wrong side of the law. And I think that's where Moondyne Joe sits.
Yeah.
But, but like all bushrangers, there's always someone, trying to make a movie about a different bushranger at some point. Just very few of them ever get made. But I had heard on the whispers on the winds that there was someone developing a Moondyne Joe movie. But unfortunately, it's just, in the world we're in now, westerns are an extremely hard genre to get financed.
Yeah.
And bushrangers fall under that, but they are even harder to finance because they're Australian westerns. So they're even more niche.
Yeah.
So they're just, and that's why we really struggled with and I've had a Ned Kelly project that I tried to get up that, again, I couldn't get off the ground.
Well, Ned Kelly's been done a lot. You had Ned Kelly with Mick Jagger. You had Ned Kelly with Heath Ledger.
You had John Jarrett do the TV series in the 80s.
Yeah.
You've got of course, you've got any number of old Chips Rafferty, silent era Ned Kelly films from that period. But
Ned Kelly was actually the first feature film ever made. The story of
it was,
Kelly Gang. Silent film filmed in Australia back in
1910, I think.
Around then.
What, 10 or 12?
Around then. And unfortunately, a lot of that has been lost to time.
I think only about 10 minutes remain, or maybe 20 or something like that.
Not a lot of it has been salvaged, but what you can see is impressive for its time. But Ned Kelly's been done a lot. There have been other bushrangers. There was Mad Dog Morgan, which was a great film. There was Captain Lightfoot. Was it Captain Lightfoot?
There was Captain Starlight with Robbery Under Arms.
Thank you. Yeah, Robbery Under Arms. Captain Starlight. I don't know, it wasn't
played by Sam Neill.
Yes, and there's been a lot of bushranger films which have all been really good. But then, as I saw with that though, it was very, very stressful for you, as I mentioned, and you. I think you were having a nervous breakdown at some stage, or very close to it, which is understandable. But then you went on and you've done The Cost.
Yes, yep. You get back in the saddle and you keep going. I mean, look, filmmaking is hell, and anyone who says differently is lying or they haven't done it properly. But yeah, no, filmmaking is always stressful. It's just part of the course, especially in Australia, and especially when you're doing things low budget and you want to be ambitious. It just is a form of hell, and you just have to accept it and find a way to deal with it. I mean, after Ben Hall, I had any number of projects that got very, very close to getting greenlit. Like I said, Glen Rowan, which was my Ned Kelly film, got very close. Blue Fin was making some headway, and then that fell over. I had a horror film that was getting pretty close as well. And again, out of sheer frustration about not being able to get these films financed, I then was like, okay, well, I've got to make another film. What can I do? And again, it was just like, how can I figure out how to make something very inexpensively? I don't want to be as ambitious as Ben Hall, but I want to make something good. And so the cost was born out of, all right, well, what resources have I got? I knew there was a location I could access for free. I knew there was some actors that said that they would work with me, for nothing if I want to go and do something. And, it was just, go out and write something nice and simple.
Yeah.
3 characters in the woods, essentially. And that was really how that was born. And off we went, and we spent about 13 months shooting that. And we had to do a lot of it through the COVID lockdowns as well.
Yeah.
But that's how that was born. Again, out of frustration about not being able to get the film financed in the normal way, we had to go out and find a way to get it financed in another way. So we got some private investors, a lot of volunteers, and just pulled every string and pulled every favor, and just went out with a bunch of like-minded people who are all passionate.
Yeah.
And made another movie.
Now, the cost was filmed in Melbourne?
It was filmed in Melbourne, but it was also filmed around the same area that we shot Ben Hall.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of familiar going back there and shooting again.
Yeah.
Different kind of movie, but we were in almost exactly the same vicinity as we shot 90% of Ben Hall.
Okay. Now, The Cost was the last one you filmed?
Yep, that was the last one that I worked on.
Yep.
And now I'm and that's the last film that I've had released.
Yeah. Now you're what's coming up? What's the next project for Matthew Holmes?
Well,
Yeah.
That's anyone's guess as to which one fires next. But I have a number of. I find that the best way to go as an indie filmmaker, and this would be my advice to any filmmaker, is always have many projects ready in the wings, because you never know which one's going to get called on next. So I've got a horror, I've got a thriller, and I'm working very, very hard on a war film at the moment, a World War II movie that I'm developing, starting to attach some cast to. And yeah, it's very exciting. I can't name the title of it yet because we haven't officially announced it, but it is a World War II war film. It is set in Papua New Guinea. It's very, very exciting. It's a true story. So It should be a lot of fun if we get to make it. Hopefully we get to make it next year.
So you're talking army?
Yep. We're talking Papua New Guinea, World War II conflict with the Japanese, true story. And it's great. It's a really, really great screenplay. I didn't write this one. It was actually pitched to me by some guys who've been working on it for over a decade, and they were ready to actually put the script up on the shelf. And they said, well, you know what? Why don't we just pitch it to that Ben Hall guy and see what he says? And I read it, I loved it, and I said, I'm in, guys, let's do it. So we've been working on that for the last 5 months or so. And just in 5 months, we've made a lot of headway. So we're hoping the wind keeps blowing the sails in that direction.
So now, a war film, Ben Hall, I'm getting the feeling there's a lot of passion for historic projects.
Yes. Very much so.
Because Twin Rivers was also set in a Depression era?
Yeah, they were set in the 1930s, the late 30s, yeah.
So there's definitely you've definitely got a feel there for the
got an inner historian.
Yes,
I think I do very much so.
So just you've got my phone number there, Matt. So just keep me in mind for the war film, won't you?
I got a lot of people who are asking me to keep them in mind for that war film. When they hear a war film, everyone's going.
I've told you before, I'll work with you anytime, and that's
thanks,
that's no lie, because the experience I had on Ben Hall was absolutely 100% incredible. It was a wonderful experience, and I loved it.
That's good.
Now, you've given some advice to about directors. Have a few projects in the background. What sort of advice would you give to someone who wants to who wants to start as a director, hasn't directed before, what advice would you give them?
All right. Well, look, to be honest, I'd probably say go and choose another career.
Yep, it's one of those.
That would be my first advice is, for heaven's sake, if there's anything else you want to do, go do that.
Yeah.
This industry, especially in this country, is so hard. It is so competitive and there's so few opportunities. Unless you burn for this stuff, unless it is in your heart to be a storyteller and a filmmaker, go do anything else.
Yeah.
But if I cannot persuade you otherwise, you want to be a filmmaker, then I'd say my next bit of advice is, if there's any way that you can as a filmmaker, go out and make some money first. Like, don't throw yourself into film school. Don't throw yourself into your 20s, making shorts. Go out and make money somehow.
Yeah.
And then once you've made money and you own 3 houses, sell a couple of those houses, and then you can pay for yourself to go be a filmmaker. Because that's really the biggest thing that holds you up. You can learn how to shoot and edit and cut and direct. Those things you can learn just by doing it. And, what holds every filmmaker back in this country is finance. It's just having the money to go out and prove what you can do. And it is the Achilles heel of everybody. So I guess if I had my time again, I would like to go back and actually financially set myself up in my 20s and be less, running around with the camera on the weekends and just be more focused on making money and then being able to pay. And then when I'm a bit older, a bit more mature, and I've been playing around with short films in my 30s, I could then pay for, say, Twin Rivers, and I could have paid for it to be done better, and I could have paid for it to be, produced in a more professional way, and it would just, and I would have been on my way. So I think that's one of the things, we all just think that we're going to run out into the industry and get a job, and it's all the doors are going to open up for us. It's just so hard.
It doesn't work that way, but it's
no,
and
you can't expect the you can't expect the film financing corporations and bodies to help you. This trough is too small. There's too many snouts in it.
Yep.
And you can't wedge your way in.
Yeah.
So you have to forge your own career. You have to find a way to forge your own career, and the easiest way to forge your own career is just to back yourself financially.
Yeah. And the problem with the film financing companies such as Screen Victoria, Film West, or the rest, I don't know about Film West, but Screen Victoria especially, in order for them to even look at you, you had to have 2 feature films under your belt that you've directed.
That's right. So immediately what does the first time filmmaker do? You're not even welcome in that trough.
Yeah.
Let alone trying to put your nose in it.
Yeah. So it's hard. Victoria, of course, is a film and TV capital. Because every man and his dog is getting into film and TV over there. I found it very easy to fill cast over there for anything.
There's plenty of people over there, and a lot of great people over there. But it's so competitive, and that's you're competing with lots of other really talented filmmakers, and also you're dealing with a lot of very experienced, talented filmmakers who are going after the same money as you are.
Yeah.
And then you've got to add on top the socio-political climate of your era that you find yourself in, and whether you, as a filmmaker, or the stories you want to tell, how do they fit within that context? Because it was different. Now it's different to what it was like in the 90s.
Yeah.
So there's just too many factors that can get in the way, and you've got to navigate all those, and you've got to be prepared to take years to do it. I mean, I've been doing this for over 25 years now, and I'm still trying to make it a living. You know what I mean? I don't consider myself someone who's, makes a living being a filmmaker. I find myself someone who's trying to make it my living.
Yeah.
So it's a very long road, and you've got to be able to hold on longer. But that would be my advice. Go out and get to the property market, and then sell the house, and then go make your movie with the proceeds from that.
Yeah. It's definitely a tough industry it's changed a lot since the days of the Ozploitation movies.
Oh, it can't even compare it. It's changed so much.
Because back then they had the 10AB or the 10BA?
10BA,
10BA, the 10BA tax offset, where initially it was, I think it was 150% of the producer's finance was claimable on tax. Then they dropped it to 100%, and then they just scrapped it completely. So there's no, they can't claim it back on tax like that, or something like that. It was
that's right.
That I think was where the Australian film industry suffered.
It absolutely did kneecap the industry. Although we lost 10BA because of the corruption and because of the corruption of the people who are exploiting the 10BA for their own financial benefit, not the benefit of the industry, that it got scrapped. So that was a real shame. They destroyed a wonderful thing for future generations, those producers. So they've got a lot to answer for, those people. They're all dinosaurs now. But it's we've got tax offsets still, but they're only up to 40% tax offsets, and they're administered in a different way. You can't use them the way you could back in the 70s and 80s. But man, what a difference it would make if we could. But even the 40% offsets now get exploited by bad producers. And I don't know how much longer it's going to get. Well, it'll stay.
We had, back in the days of the Ozploitation, we had some great movies came out. You had you had Mad Max,
Man from Snow River.
Yeah, Man from Snowy River. Mad Max. They were given the option of the actors were given the option of percentage of profits or a small amount, and they chose the small amount because they were like, we don't know if this is going to work. They're probably all kicking themselves because with all the
sequels,
the sequels, the crew for Mad Max, the first Mad Max film, were paid in slabs of beer.
Yeah.
They weren't paid cash, they were paid slabs of beer. But you had what else? You had Turkey Shoot, you had Stork, you had The Club. Crocodile Dundee, which was a cinema phenomena because it was, 16 months it lasted in the cinemas.
Yep, and it made a huge splash in America.
Yeah, and because it was so popular, there it was 16 months, and it was just full houses all the time. And the movie company turned around and said, we've got to get this on home video, we're overdue for that. They ended up releasing it on VHS while it was still in cinemas, which had never been done before. It was it was always a gap after the cinema release. It was still in cinemas.
I remember that.
It was still in cinemas. But it was huge. And yes, that did open up the Australia to America. And it gave Paul Hogan a massive career boost, because prior to that he had been, he did a few ads, but he was the, he was just the lovable larrikin on the Hogue show.
That's right.
He never did anything before, apart from those two things. He did the, throw a shrimp on the Barbie ads. But otherwise, he was a nobody. And now look at him.
That's right. He's a legend.
The Australian film industry can open up windows of opportunity, but you've got to be extremely lucky. Yeah,
you do have to be very lucky. You have to be well connected, and that's probably one of the hardest things in this industry, I find, as a filmmaker, is validation. If someone else isn't validating you, if you don't have media singing your praises, if you don't have certain film festivals pouring all over you, if you don't have connections to high-profile producers, if you don't have connections to high-profile actors, if you've got to build them from the ground up and you don't have that leg up, you're essentially starting the race at the starting blocks. Those who have those kinds of connections are starting 50 meters down the track. Of course, they're going to win the race. So it really is about who you're connected to and what relationships you've formed. And even me, I've had the advantage of, I've had some really great support from people over the years who helped me get my films made. Each of my features has got someone in it that helped me, get that leg up. I had Rolf to here help me with Twin Rivers to get that finished. I wouldn't have finished it without Rolf to here's support. I had Greg McLean, the Wolf Creek director. He helped me with The Legend of Ben Hall. Without his support, I wouldn't have got there. And with the cost, I had the support of Russell Cunningham and some private investors who I'd met on Ben Hall that helped me get there.
Yeah.
So it was you really need that help and those established relationships. Going at it on your own is you can't do it on your own.
Not unless you're going to do extremely low budget, which is never going to get released anywhere.
No, unless you can. Festivals. Unless you have a very wealthy uncle or a parents, or you literally pay your way. You can buy actors, you can buy that kind of support, but you've got to, if you don't have the money, you've got to do it some way. So I just think I think there is an attitude that I have seen people go into, they go to film school. They leave school, they go to film school, and they they come out of university or whatever, and they just go, well, I'm a director now, or I'm this part, I've got this, and I want full pay, and I want a full-time job, and you just think, what are you doing? That is not how this industry works. You cannot do it. I started pushing a broom at Anifex. I started at the very, very bottom. And because that's how I was told, you start at the bottom and you work your way up. Yep. And you show yourself at every step of the way to be a valuable member of the team. And I went from the broom pusher to, their head animator. Now, and that took me 10 years to climb that ladder, but I climbed it. And it's the same in this industry. I started as an absolute nobody filmmaker with a camcorder making films with my brother. And now I'm sending scripts to people like Eric Banner, and I've got producers who are helping me do that, and I've got fantastic writers that I'm working with, and all this sort of thing. And I've got 3 films that have been on television and in the cinema and so on. So it took me 25 years though.
Yeah.
But that's how the industry goes. You've got to just take your time. So if you're not patient, I would say this industry ain't for you.
Yeah.
I find that with anything, you've got to work way up to appreciate the processes as well.
Definitely.
Especially in theatre. If you want to direct, it's good that you do ensemble or, be on the stage, then behind the stage, do lighting,
Absolutely.
And do those things so when you come to direct, you understand the processes that need to happen.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. You'd be a far better director if you know all those processes and you've seen how the machine works behind the curtain. Yeah. If you'll be a far better director than if you just swan in and you don't know anything about that. And I do find that I have seen work of directors who haven't done hard yards and for whatever reason have managed to luck their way into the front. Yeah. And you see their work and you go, yeah, I can sort of see that you haven't matured yet. Yeah. So I think it's a good process, and and for me, I've done every job on the film set. I've been the broom sweeper, the cameraman, I've been the lighting guy, I've done the unit, the makeup, I've done the acting. So when you've done every job on the film set, you can appreciate every job on the film set, and how valuable there's no part of a film set, no crew member who is not valuable. No. Yeah. And so once you really understand and appreciate that, then I think you're on your way to being a good filmmaker, because you truly understand the process.
Yep. You need to know, and it's the same with business management or anything. If you're going to be a leader in something, and let's face it, a director and a producer, they're the leaders in the film.
Oh yeah, they're the generals. Yeah.
You need to understand how not just the process of those working with you, but also the different stresses that they have to go through, so that you can manage them in the right way, because a director is basically a manager. You know,
absolutely, and a very much a manager of people and their personalities.
Yes, so it's important to understand all that. So you have to have lived all of those different things. That's my. You don't have to be a great actor. In my opinion, you don't have to be a great actor in order to be a director. You need to have a good vision. But you need to know.
No, that's right.
But you need to know the process. You need to be able to relate to them, and you need to understand the different pressures and so forth that they have. You know.
And you had to be a good communicator.
Yes.
A very good communicator, really. And I mean, every actor you direct differently, I've found.
Yeah.
There's not, you know. And you discover the language that works for each actor. Some need very little attention. Some need an abundance of attention. Some like to be given certain type of direction, and others hate it. And that's part of being, I think, as a good director is reading. How do you get the best out of people? Yeah. What does that particular crew or cast member need me to be so that I get their best work out of them? Yeah. Which is why if you go out with this one, you know, with the one approach for everybody, or you run around your film set like a tyrant, just telling everybody to do it your way, none of these things really work. It only works if you truly can embrace both the spirit of collaboration, keeping yourself the boss. It's still your vision, but the spirit of collaboration and how you communicate with people.
Yeah, yeah. We are going to have to end the interview soon, but Matthew, I would love. I've told you before. I've told you many times ever since my first experience on when we went to Gundagai, and I helped drive the bus to Gundagai. By the way,
that's right, you did.
I have to get to Gundagai.
It was quite an odyssey getting up there. That was quite a safari.
It was fun. That's the thing. It was a fun shoot.
Mm. We were out there playing cowboys.
Yeah. But it was great. I mean, a lot of the time I was also your unit manager for.
That's right. I remember that
part of it, looking after the extras and dealing with all that. You know, up the top, watching all the action down below. You know, that was exciting. But I told you right from the word go, Matthew, that I will be. I would love to work with you on any project, and I do have my film that I'm still trying to get into production, which I think I don't know if I've ever sent you the script, but I'm looking for a producer.
No, we've spoken about it, but I've not read it.
I will have to send it through to you. I know that Andy McPhee has read it, and he liked it so much that he used it for teaching acting.
That's great.
That was a huge honour when I found that out, and he didn't even tell me. Mind you, I never got the footage from him. I asked him to make sure I got the footage, and he hasn't. But
he's a bit of a busy boy, as old Andy.
He is. But that was a huge honour. So I must have done something right with the script.
I'd say so.
So. I'll send it through to you, Matthew. We'll talk turkey, but like I've said, I'll work with you anytime because
thanks, mate. I appreciate that.
Your passion for filming is your passion for the film industry is huge. Passion for filmmaking is huge. You have this great vision. When you make a movie, you throw everything into it. Poor Nadia, who doesn't see you for months on end, she's probably thankful when you come home, but it's
she knows it comes with sacrifice. She has to share me.
Mind you, she probably also gets she's probably sitting there going, "Oh, thank God, peace and quiet for once."
That's it. But, I don't have to hear any more about his film. He's off making it now.
But I mean, even looking at your what do you call it? Not drawing board. What do you call it? Storyboard. Thank you. Your storyboards, your illustrations. you can make a film just using your storyboards, because your drawing is unbelievable. My storyboards look like melon heads. It's just bob heads, in different positions going, that's, so that we know what angles I want to shoot. But Matthew, we do have to wrap up the interview, but
no worries.
It has been, as usual, it's been a great pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, mate. No, it's been fun.
We
going over the old days.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get you back on the show again, and if you're ever in Perth, make sure you come and talk to us here at IPL Radio.
Absolutely, and yeah, hopefully I'll talk to you about a World War II film in the not too distant future.
Awesome. Cheryl, was there anything you wanted to ask?
Not really.
No,
you've covered it, everything.
Covered everything.
I was thinking, I'll ask that, and then no, that's covered. I'll ask that. Oh no, that's covered. Yeah. So yeah, he did everything. That's all right. I keep him on track. He tends to waffle off sometimes.
Cheryl's actually
No.
Cheryl's a great. Matthew knows. He's worked with me. He spent a long weekend in Gundagai with me, and he spent another long weekend in country. That was freezing cold in country Victoria. But anyway, Matthew, thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
I'll talk to you really soon. Okay.
No worries. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. It was fun.
No worries. Thank you.
Ciao for now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
That was Matthew Holmes from Two Tone Pictures. Great guy.